48 hours ago, my father looked me dead in the face and said, "If you love painting walls so much, go sleep against one." 2 years ago, he told me to live on the streets. What he didn't know, last year, I cleared $10 million. If you've ever been told your dream was trash by the one person who should have believed in you, hit subscribe. And if you're still proving them wrong in silence, stay. This one's going to feel personal. My name is Sierra Vale. I'm 32 years old, and I built an art licensing empire out of a storage unit and pure spite. But let me take you back to the night I got kicked out. I was standing in my dad's kitchen in Phoenix, paint still under my nails from a mural I'd just finished downtown. The house smelled like overcooked pot roast and disappointment. My older brother, Grant, sat at the table scrolling through his phone, smirking like he'd already won something. "You're almost 30, my dad snapped, pacing like a drill sergeant who'd misplaced his army. "You have no 401k, no real job, no stability. You spray cartoons on buildings and call it a career." "They're commercial contracts," I said. "I have 3 corporate clients right now." He barked a laugh. "Corporate? Sierra, you painted a taco truck and a yoga studio." Mom didn't look up. She just kept folding napkins like if she creased them sharp enough, I'd fold too. Then he dropped it. "If you're so obsessed with this street art nonsense, go live on the streets. Go be a starving artist, but don't come crawling back when the city finds you and your little dream dries up." 2 years ago, those words hollowed me out. I'd just turned 30, my savings were thin because I'd poured everything into launching my online licensing platform. I was broke, not aesthetic broke, the kind where you calculate gas mileage before saying yes to coffee. I remember my throat burning. I remember Grant muttering, "Told you this phase wouldn't last." Phase. That word hit harder than streets. Because I wasn't experimenting, I was building something. They just couldn't see it yet. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just said, "Okay," and packed. My dad didn't try to stop me. He held the door open like he was doing me a favor. You ever notice how fast a porch light turns off when someone's done believing in you? That click echoed for years. I moved into a tiny industrial storage unit I'd converted into a makeshift studio. It technically wasn't zoned for living. I didn't care. I had a mattress, a hot plate, and Wi-Fi. Priorities. During the day, I painted murals and designed patterns. At night, I uploaded digital versions of my art onto a platform I'd built called Canvas Current. The idea was simple. Brands could license my designs for textiles, packaging, phone cases, anything. No middlemen, no galleries taking 60%. Everyone told me it was stupid. My dad thought licensing meant printing t-shirts at the mall kiosk. Grant told people I was basically homeless. He wasn't wrong about the second part. The first year nearly broke me. A city inspector fined me for a mural permit issue. I maxed a credit card paying it off. A client ghosted me after I finished a full design suite. I ate ramen so often I started seasoning it with leftover soy sauce packets from gas stations like some survival hack. I'd lie awake at night staring at the metal ceiling of that unit thinking, maybe they're right. Maybe I should have just taken the marketing job my dad lined up through his friend. Maybe stability is more important than pride. Then, one random Tuesday, a boutique home decor brand in Austin licensed 3 of my floral patterns. It wasn't huge, $12,000, but it was real. Then, a pet accessory company picked up my abstract dog series. Then, a sustainable shoe startup licensed a repeating geometric I'd almost deleted. Each deal was small, but together they stacked. I stopped painting just walls and started designing collections. I hired a freelance attorney to clean up my contracts. I reinvested everything. No new clothes, no fancy dinners, just growth. Year 2, a national retailer discovered Canvas Current through Instagram. They licensed an entire summer line. That contract alone was 7 figures. 7. I remember sitting on the concrete floor of that storage unit, staring at the DocuSign confirmation like it was a hallucination. The same hands my dad said would end up stained and useless had just signed a deal worth more than he'd made in 5 years. I didn't call him. That part's important. I didn't run back screaming, "Look at me now," because something had shifted. The hunger to prove him wrong slowly transformed into something colder. Detachment. Success stopped being about revenge and started being about insulation. By the end of year 2, Canvas Current wasn't just me anymore. I'd onboarded 12 independent artists. I took a percentage of their licensing deals and handled negotiations. I moved out of the storage unit and into a downtown Phoenix loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick. The irony? It overlooked the same district where I'd once painted for $800 cash. Last fiscal year, our combined licensing revenue crossed $10 million. My personal take-home, just over 10, and no one in my family knew. Not because I was hiding, but because they'd already decided who I was. Have you ever realized that once someone locks you into a version of yourself, they stop listening for updates? Last month, my mom texted me out of nowhere, "Your father's birthday dinner, 7 p.m. Sunday. Please don't make it awkward." Please don't make it awkward? Like I was the unstable variable. I almost declined, but something in me wanted to see it, to measure the distance between then and now. So I went. Grant was already there when I walked in, complaining about mortgage rates. He works in insurance now. Safe, predictable, approved. My dad looked older, same posture though, like he was perpetually bracing for disappointment. "Still doing the art thing?" he asked before I'd even sat down. "Yeah, still doing the art thing," I said calmly. He shook his head. "You know, your cousin Melissa just got promoted to regional manager. That's growth. That's something you can build a life on." I sipped my water. "I built something," I said lightly. Grant snorted. "Yeah? Your Etsy blowing up?" They laughed. I didn't, because in 3 weeks, Canvas Current was being acquired in a partial equity deal by a global lifestyle conglomerate. The press release was already drafted. The valuation, 9 figures. My dad told me to live on the streets. In 21 days, the same business pages he worshipped would print my name, and I was done shrinking. Have you ever sat at a table with people who underestimated you so badly that the truth would feel like a bomb? That's where I was sitting, and for the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I was patient.
You ever sit across from someone who thinks they know your ceiling while you're quietly negotiating the sky? That birthday dinner stretched like cheap elastic. My dad carving steak like he was performing surgery. My mom monitoring everyone's tone like she could control the weather. Grant explaining compound interest to me as if I'd just discovered electricity last week. "You really should think long term," Grant said, cutting into his ribeye. "Art's cute, but it's not scalable." Not scalable. I almost choked on my water. Scalable was literally my entire business model. "I'll keep that in mind," I said smoothly. My dad leaned back in his chair. "You know, Sierra, it's not too late. You could still pivot, take some classes, get certified in something real. Graphic design for a firm, maybe. Stability matters. You don't want to wake up at 40 with nothing." Nothing. The word didn't sting anymore. It just sounded outdated, like someone arguing about VHS tapes in a Netflix world. I studied him. The lines around his eyes, the stubborn pride stitched into his posture. He wasn't trying to be cruel in that moment. He genuinely believed he was saving me from future humiliation. The problem, he'd confused control with protection my whole life. Dinner ended with polite hugs. My mom squeezed my hand a little too tight. "Please don't disappear again," she whispered. Disappear? I hadn't disappeared. I'd just stopped reporting. 3 days later, I was in New York sitting across from executives at Arden Global Lifestyle Group. Glass conference room, Manhattan's skyline behind them like a flex, Canvas Current's growth charts projected on a massive screen. Their CFO tapped a pen thoughtfully. "Your licensing infrastructure is lean. Your margins are impressive. What you've built is rare." Rare. No one had ever used that word about me growing up. The deal on the table was a 40% acquisition for expansion capital, global distribution access, and infrastructure scaling. The valuation? $120 million. My personal equity payout up front would clear just over $10 million annually after restructuring and retention bonuses. $10 million a year. I kept my face neutral. Inside, my heart was doing backflips in stilettos. 2 years ago, I slept next to paint cans. Now I was negotiating international textile pipelines. Life is wild like that. "Why didn't you approach us earlier?" one of the board members asked. I paused. Because I needed to know I could build it without anyone rescuing me. Because I needed to survive the streets first. Because I needed to prove something to myself, not to them. Instead, I said, timing. We signed the preliminary agreement the following week. Press embargo set for 14 days. 14 days until my last name hit business wires. 14 days until Google stopped autofilling my name with struggling muralist. 14 days until my dad's favorite local news anchor said my name on air. And then something happened I didn't expect. Grant called. Out of nowhere. "You still got that old Civic?" he asked, casually. "No," I said. "Upgraded." He chuckled. "Must be nice. Anyway, I'm thinking about starting something on the side. Nothing crazy. Maybe flipping properties? You ever think about investing?" There it was. The tone shift. He didn't know the numbers, but he sensed something. Predators smell movement. "Investing is risky," I said evenly. "You should probably stick to stability." He went quiet for half a second. Okay, he said with a forced laugh. "No need to get defensive." Defensive, that word again. It's funny how people project the emotion they're actually feeling. A week before the press release, my mom called crying. "Your father's company lost a major contract," she said softly. "He's stressed. He won't say it, but things are tight." I leaned back in my loft, staring at the city lights. The old version of me would have immediately offered help, transferred money quietly, covered bills anonymously, proved I was useful. But something Naomi, my attorney and unofficial emotional referee, once told me echoed in my head. Rescuing people who never respected you doesn't heal you, it just keeps the hierarchy intact. So I asked carefully, "Did he ask for help?" "No," she said quickly, "he'd never." Of course he wouldn't. Pride is expensive. "Mom," I said gently, "I hope it works out." She waited for more. There wasn't any. That night I couldn't sleep, not because I felt guilty, but because I realized the roles were about to flip publicly, and I didn't know how ugly that would get. The morning of the announcement, my phone started buzzing at 6:03 a.m. Emails, texts, Slack exploding. The headline went live on Business Insider first. Street artist builds $120 million licensing empire. Phoenix founder redefines creative ownership. My face, my name, my revenue. $10 million annual earnings confirmed in the subheading. Within an hour, CNBC picked it up, then local Phoenix stations, and because the universe has a sense of drama, my dad's favorite morning news program ran the segment at 8:17 a.m. I know the exact time because my mom texted me. We just saw. No punctuation, just that. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Dad. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Silence on the other end at first, then a throat clearing. 10 million? He asked. Not hello, not congratulations, just the number. Yes, I said calmly. Another pause. And this acquisition, that's real? Yes. I could practically hear him recalculating every dinner conversation of the last 2 years, every joke, every dismissal, every porch light click. "Why didn't you tell us?" he finally asked. The same question parents always ask when the truth becomes undeniable. "Because you didn't believe me when the numbers were smaller." I didn't say that. Instead, I said, "You told me to live on the streets, so I did. I built it there." He exhaled sharply. "I was trying to motivate you." "You motivated me," I replied evenly. Silence stretched. Then quietly, "We look stupid." There it was. Not, "I'm proud of you." Not, "I'm sorry." We look stupid. Image. Always image. I leaned against my kitchen counter, sunlight spilling across marble that cost more than his old truck. This was never about how you look. It was about how you made me feel. Another long pause. "We should do dinner," he said finally. "Talk about how to handle this." Handle this. Like it was a PR crisis. "Sure," I said, because I wasn't running anymore. 2 years ago, he told me to survive the streets. Now he wanted to survive the headlines. And for the first time in my life, I had the leverage. You ever walk back into a room that once broke you, knowing you own the damn building now? That's what it felt like, pulling into my parents' driveway 3 nights after the headlines exploded. Same cracked concrete, same basketball hoop with the crooked rim, same porch light that once snapped off behind me like a verdict. Only this time, it stayed on. Grant's truck was already parked outside. He'd probably rushed over the second his group chat started blowing up with screenshots. I sat in my car for a second, engine idling, watching my reflection in the rearview mirror. 2 years ago, I left here feeling disposable. Now I was walking in as the daughter who made more in a quarter than my dad's construction company did in a year. And weirdly, it didn't feel triumphant. It felt heavy. I knocked. My mom opened the door almost immediately, eyes red like she'd been crying. "Oh, Sierra," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt more desperate than warm. The house smelled the same, lemon cleaner and old wood. Grant stood by the kitchen counter, arms crossed. My dad sat at the table, hands folded in front of him like he was preparing for a loan negotiation, which, in a way, he was. "Sit," he said. "No yelling this time, no pacing, just controlled tension." I sat across from him, the same seat I'd been in when he told me to go live on the streets. Full circle. Cute. He cleared his throat. "So, this is real. It's real. And you're making that much?" "Yes." Grant let out a low whistle. 10 million a year from patterns and doodles. That's insane. Patterns and doodles. Even now. My dad shot him a look. "This isn't a joke." Then he looked at me again. "I was hard on you," he said slowly, "but I did it because I didn't want you struggling." I held his gaze. "I did struggle." He blinked. "Well, clearly not that bad." I laughed once, short, sharp. "I lived in a storage unit for 8 months. My mom's head snapped toward me. "What?" "You heard me." Silence swallowed the room. "I didn't tell you because every time I tried to explain anything about my work, you mocked it, so I figured I'd just build it quietly." Dad's jaw tightened. "You could have asked for help. From the man who told me to go sleep on the streets?" That landed. Grant shifted uncomfortably. "Okay, but that was 2 years ago. We're here now. You made it. Isn't that what matters? Isn't that what matters?" That sentence right there, that's how families erase history. I leaned back in my chair. "No," I said calmly. "What matters is that you only respect it now because there's a number attached." My dad's nostrils flared slightly, defensive mode activating. "That's not fair. It's accurate." My mom reached for his arm like she was defusing a bomb. "Sierra, we're proud of you. We just didn't understand. You didn't try to understand. The difference matters." My dad exhaled heavily. "Look, people are talking. The neighbors, church friends, they're asking questions. We need to be on the same page about how this story sounds." There it was again. Image, narrative control. "We?" I repeated. "Yes, we," he insisted. "You're our daughter." The irony almost made me dizzy. I folded my hands on the table. 2 years ago, you weren't my daughter. You were an embarrassment." His face hardened. "Don't twist it." "I'm not twisting anything. You told me to live on the streets. That's not tough love. That's rejection." Grant muttered, "Okay, but she didn't actually end up on the streets." I turned to him slowly. "You called me basically homeless at Thanksgiving." He went quiet. My mom's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't know you were hurting like that." I softened slightly at her tone. "You didn't want to know." The room sat in that truth for a long, uncomfortable minute. Then my dad did something I didn't expect. He lowered his voice. "My company's struggling," he admitted. There it was again, the real reason for the urgency. "We lost 2 contracts, cash flow's tight, and now everyone thinks we're sitting on a gold mine because of you." So this was about money, or at least about proximity to it. "I'm not a bailout plan," I said gently but firmly. "You didn't ask for a handout," he snapped. "You're about to." Silence. Grant rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, maybe there's a way to collaborate, cross-promotion, investment, something." Ah, now we were entrepreneurs. 2 years ago, I was delusional. Now I was an opportunity. I stood up slowly. "You don't get to skip the apology and jump straight to the partnership." Dad's face flushed. "I don't owe you an apology for pushing you. You owe me an apology for dismissing me." He opened his mouth, then closed it, pride wrestling with reality. "I was scared," he finally muttered. "That cracked something open." "Of what?" I asked quietly. "That you'd fail, that people would laugh at you, that I'd have to watch you fall apart." I swallowed. "I did fail," I said, quietly, "over and over, and you weren't there for any of it." That hurt him, I saw it, because deep down he'd always believed he was the protector, but protection without belief feels like control. My mom reached across the table and took my hand. "We were wrong," she whispered. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. I looked at my dad. He hesitated. Then, stiffly, "Maybe I misjudged. Not perfect, not poetic, but it was the first crack in the armor." Grant looked between us like he was watching a negotiation close. "So what now?" he asked. That question hung in the air. 2 years ago, I would have answered with whatever kept the peace. Now, I had options.
I'm not cutting you off, I said carefully, but the relationship changes. Dad frowned. Meaning I don't shrink to make you comfortable anymore. You don't get to rewrite history. And if we talk business, it's formal. Contracts, boundaries, no guilt leverage. Grant raised his eyebrows. You sound like a lawyer. I learned. Dad leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was someone new. Maybe I was. You really don't need us, do you? He asked quietly. I paused. That was the wrong question. I always needed you. I just didn't need your permission. That one landed deep. For the first time that night, no one had a comeback. And as I walked out of that house again, porch lights still glowing behind me, I realized something wild. The girl who left here 2 years ago was trying to survive. The woman leaving now, though, she was choosing. And that difference changes everything.
You'd think making $10 million a year would feel louder. Champagne showers, victory laps, some cinematic look at me now moment where confetti falls and your haters dissolve into dust. It doesn't. It feels quiet, like insulation, like finally sleeping through the night without rehearsing imaginary arguments in your head. A week after that dinner, my dad called again. Not about money, not about image, just called. I've been thinking, he said, voice steadier than before. I was wrong about one thing. Only one? I teased lightly. He exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh. I thought stability only came one way. I thought if it didn't look like mine, it wasn't real. I didn't interrupt. When you left, he continued, I told myself you'd come back, that you'd need us. And when you didn't, I took it personal. There it was. Not anger, not pride, wounded ego. I didn't come back because I was building something, I said calmly, and I couldn't build it while defending it every day. He was quiet for a long moment. I don't understand what you do, he admitted finally, but I understand numbers, and I understand grit, and you've got both. It wasn't a movie apology, no dramatic, I'm sorry for everything, but it was honest, and honesty hits different. Meanwhile, the world kept spinning. The acquisition closed officially, my equity payout wired in tranches that still make me blink when I log into my bank account. Canvas Current expanded internationally. Paris, Tokyo, Sao Paulo. We onboarded artists who used to DM me asking for advice. Grant started texting me business podcasts like we were suddenly peers in the same arena. Good episode on scaling, he'd write. Scaling. I'd just reply with a thumbs up. He wasn't malicious anymore, just recalibrating. My mom began forwarding me articles about creative entrepreneurship, like she'd discovered a new species. And the town? Oh, the town adjusted fast. The same neighbors who once asked if I was still doing that graffiti thing now introduced me at block parties like I was a walking TED Talk. Did you know she built a 9-figure company? 9 figures rolls off their tongues easier than we doubted her. But here's the twist no one tells you about proving people wrong. It doesn't erase the original hurt. It just reframes it. I still remember the porch light clicking off. I just don't flinch at it anymore. 3 months after the headlines, I was invited to speak at a regional entrepreneurship summit in Arizona. Big venue, corporate sponsors, polished stage. Guess who was in the front row? My parents. Grant, too. Dad wore his good jacket, the one he saves for weddings and serious meetings. I stepped onto that stage under warm lights, mic clipped neatly to my blazer, and for a split second, I saw myself 2 years ago, sitting on a mattress in a storage unit, laptop balanced on my knees, wondering if I was delusional. Then I saw the crowd, hundreds of faces, some skeptical, some hopeful, some probably one argument away from quitting. I started with the truth. 2 years ago, someone told me to go live on the streets if I believed in my work so much. You could feel the room shift. I did, not literally, but emotionally, financially. I had nothing stable except belief. I didn't bash my dad. I didn't dramatize it. I just told it straight. How many of you have been misunderstood by someone you love? I asked. Hands went up. That doesn't make them villains. It makes them human. But here's the part no one tells you. You don't need unanimous belief to build something real. You need stubborn clarity. Stubborn clarity. That's what saved me. Not revenge, not spite. Clarity. After the talk, people lined up to speak to me. One girl, maybe 23, shaking slightly, said, "My dad says I'm wasting my degree trying to start a skincare line." I smiled softly. "Are you?" She hesitated. "No." "Then don't outsource your self-worth to someone else's fear." She exhaled like I'd just handed her oxygen. When the crowd thinned, my parents approached. My mom hugged me first, eyes shining. "You were incredible," she whispered. Grant clapped me on the shoulder. Okay, that was legit. Then my dad stepped forward. He didn't hug me, that's not his style, but he held my gaze longer than usual. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Know what?" I asked. "How strong you were." I tilted my head slightly. "You helped build that strength," I said. His eyebrows lifted. "By kicking you out?" he asked carefully. "By underestimating me," I replied. "By forcing me to define myself without your approval." He absorbed that. It wasn't blame, it wasn't pride, just truth. We stood there in a strange, peaceful silence. No scorekeeping, no power struggle, just recalibration. Later that night, back in my loft, city lights blinking below, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. 10 million a year. The number still felt surreal. But here's what mattered more. I didn't check it to prove anything anymore. I checked it because I built it. From nothing, from doubt, from a porch light switching off. People love a revenge arc. They want the moment where you buy your parents' house and evict them, or pull up in a supercar and toss keys on the table. That's cute for movies. Real power is walking back into the same room without shrinking, is choosing boundaries over bitterness, is knowing you could help, but only if respect is mutual. My dad hasn't asked for money, not once, and I think that's because somewhere along the way, he realized this wasn't a lottery win. It was earned, brick by brick, brushstroke by brushstroke. And the girl he told to go live on the streets, she did, metaphorically, and she learned how to own the block. So let me ask you something. If the people who doubted you suddenly had to read your success in headlines, would you run back for validation? Or would you build so solid that you don't need it anymore? Because here's what I learned the hard way. Money changes how loud the room gets, but self-respect? That's the real upgrade. And once you have it, nobody gets to turn your light off again.